Hi guys, my name is Emma and today I'm going to be doing my wrap up for Mum's TBR. So if you've no idea what I'm on about, beginning of January Mum and I sat down and I gave her 5 different categories that she had to then go and pick books off of her bookshelf that to give to me for me to read. The idea was she was going to pick things that she hoped that I would enjoy, and if I remember the categories correctly, because I did not write them down and I have not watched that video back, it was a book that she's taught because she's an English teacher, a book that she hasn't read and wanted me to guinea pig, a book that had orange on it, a book that was under 150 pages, and I think a classic. That sounds about right. So I have now read them. It is pretty much the end of January. I've read all 5. They are here. And I'm just going to do a little wrap up for you now. So of the 5 that she gave me, I am trying to organise them now in my hand. I really enjoyed 2 of them, and then I really didn't enjoy 3 of them. It was quite a polarising reading experience. So the 2 I enjoyed, I gave 5 stars to both of them, but then the 3 I didn't enjoy, basically none of them got higher than about a 2.5 star. So let's start positive and talk about the 2 that I did enjoy. The first book that I finished for her TBR was Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. This isn't her copy. I went out and bought my own one because she had annotated hers really heavily from studying English literature at university, and I really wanted my own copy that didn't have her notes on it. It's the Penguin English Library paperback, which is one of my favourite classics collections out there. I flipping loved this book. This is the first Austen I've ever read, and it was just so darn good. I had no idea Austen was so flipping funny. This one especially is basically a bit of a pastiche of the Gothic novel, and it was really fitting because I just finished 2 Gothic novels, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Frankenstein, before reading this, so a lot of those tropes were like very fresh in my mind. This is just, it's light, it's fun, it's entertaining. It brought to life a time period that I don't know a crazy amount about, and I always thought of classics as being quite dull, especially ones which are focused on women, because basically women couldn't do a lot back in the day. Like, we didn't have much to do, whereas this was just, I was so invested. Like, I cared so much about these characters and about the kind of minutiae of their day and what was going on, and she has such a light, lovely writing style that I am so psyched to get to more. I've got Persuasion and Emma on my bookshelves, and I'm definitely going to prioritise getting to them above some other classics books, which I really just wasn't expecting. So well done, Jane Austen. Northanger Abbey, amazing. The other one that I really enjoyed, which again entertainingly was a book that I was kind of planning on reading anyway before Mum gave it to me, is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. Now this is a non-fiction book. It's kind of an extended essay based off of a talk that she gave at Girton College in Cambridge, I think, which I've been to. It's gorgeous, by the way. This is specifically talking about women in literature and why women will never create anything good unless they basically have a solid income of themselves and a room of their own to be able to work in. It's really a brilliant discussion about women and what holds us back. And so this, to give you kind of context, this was written in 1928, I want to say. It's such an it's so interesting to go back to feminist texts from the past and see what is still relevant today and what we've improved upon and where we can kind of go next. And I just think it's so fascinating. This is really interesting because it kind of taps into all of those discussions about, you know, well, if when people say we need to have more women writers, we need to have more women directors, we need to have more women in creative roles creating things, and the kind of underlying idea of being like, well, if women were any good at this, they would have done it already. And actually it's discussing the idea of, you know, especially in creative endeavours, your work is influenced by what has come before it. So a woman in the time of Shakespeare could never have been Shakespeare because there wasn't the canon of literature that Shakespeare was referring back to be Shakespeare. And this is lovely because it really talks, I just hit my own chin. This is lovely because it talks about people like the Bronte sisters and Austen and George Eliot and people like that. And again, it's that if they hadn't come before, then we wouldn't be able to do stuff now. And again, if people like Virginia Woolf hadn't come before, then a lot of the feminist literature that we have now wouldn't exist. And I think it's so fascinating how work interacts with other works around it rather than just them being kind of isolated pockets. And I think I've just finished reading Vox, which I talked about in my 24 and 48 wrap up, which I'll link down below. And I also I've read like Naomi Alderman's The Power last year, which I've talked about on this channel before, and those kind of books wouldn't exist without Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. And I just think it's so interesting talking about this kind of catalogue of like ideas, because it's really important when you think about these narratives about like, oh, why does representation matter? Like, why does it matter if we have more women in STEM or not? It's like, because unless you see people doing it, you're not necessarily going to think to do it yourself. Like, when the fastest time for a mile was broken, whenever that was, there was like a guy who ran super quickly and it was awesome. But like, after he did that, about 10 other people did it within about a month. But if it was so easy for them to do that, then why didn't they do it before he did it? It's because you need to see somebody do it before you realise that you can. I'm now rambling really, really long, so basically this was great and I'm going to move on. So those were the good ones. Now I'm going to go on to the not so good ones, sorry. First one was The Chronicles of Narnia, The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. This is technically book 1 in this series, but it is not book 1 in publication order, and this is where I think I got let down by it. I had a really interesting discussion in the comments of my mum's TBR video where we picked out these books. Basically, I can't remember your name, I'm so sorry, I'm rubbish, I should have looked it up before I started talking. Basically, it was this lovely woman who was saying, like, don't read The Magician's Nephew first, you need to read them in publication order, because there's a whole bunch of things that you're going to miss because you don't have that back catalogue. Like, this is a prequel, but it only works if you've read the original stuff. So, given that, it wasn't surprising that I didn't really enjoy it. It felt very clunky, it felt very heavy-handed. The witch in it was really cool. Like, she's a great female character. She just doesn't give a damn. She's gonna do what she wants and nobody's gonna hold her back. So I respect her quite a lot. She actually featured on top 10 villain characters by Books Like Woe, Mara from Books Like Woe. I'll link that down below because I think she has a really great discussion about the witch from... I didn't have enough of an emotional connection to Narnia as a concept to care about this book, and it felt so heavy-handed at the end. Like, C.S. Lewis uses a lot of religious imagery and a lot of religious undertones to his story, and that felt so unbelievably clunky at the end and forced. So didn't enjoy it, but haven't ruled out C.S. Lewis in general and have not ruled out Narnia in general. Then we have The Duchess of Malfi by John Webster. This is actually a play, and this was the one that Mum picked because she hasn't actually read this. Now, as far as plays go, this is from the 15th century, I want to say. 15th or 16th century. We're kind of talking similar-ish time to Shakespeare as far as I'm aware. And generally, the basic plot line is like, woman is a widow, gets married to, I think, a servant-ish in her house. Isn't really supposed to, has kids from him, all a bit scandalous, hides it from her twin brother finds out, twin brother orchestrates it so that she dies and gets strangled by a religious person, like a cardinal, and then twin brother goes insane with lycanthropy, which I'm pretty sure is werewolfism, so that's interesting, and then he dies, and then basically everybody dies, and I don't really got what went on. The problem with plays, especially plays that aren't modern, is that a lot of the vernacular language that we use today is different. Various things that have double entendre, innuendo, hidden meaning, thinly veiled threats, all of those kind of things that are seminal to communication are lost because that's not a phrase that we use anymore. That's fallen out of usage. That's not something that I can connect to. Which, when you see older plays actually on stage, the actors can do a lot with their inflection and with their body language to make sure that you still understand the message. However, when that's written down, that goes straight over your head. Or at least it does for me anyway. So whilst this was pretty as far as books go, like it was perfectly lovely language, I didn't really get what was going on half the time. I didn't really care. It seemed really short, and I think that this would have worked so much better had I actually seen it on stage rather than written down. Like, this felt like a slog from start to finish. And then the final one I have to talk about is Summer's Lease by John Mortimer. So this is a book from the 80s and is basically kind of a soft, cozy thriller with a summer holiday vibe to it. It's a family who take on a lease for a villa out in Italy for about 3 weeks in the summer, but then there's sort of some mysterious things going on. The person who they're leasing it from seems very sketchy. There's some weird specifications for like who's allowed to take it, which almost implies that they're kind of like pretending to be the family that originally lives there. There's a whole thing going on with the water board. There's a whole thing going on with like there's a sketchy death. And I can see why Mum suggested that I read it, because actually on paper, you know, a vague plot summary, it sounds kind of entertaining, like it sounds good from the plot, but I hated all of the characters. Like, so many of the characters were so two-dimensional and boring that a lot of what they were doing really didn't strike a chord. I didn't really care about half the thrillers because I didn't care about the characters, so I wasn't invested in if they were in danger or not. And the males, like the adult males in this book, were absolutely awful. So the family take the father-in-law along. He basically kind of invites himself, and he is this decrepit geezer type character who is super sexist and just really vile and sleeps around and openly admits that he cheated on his wife a bunch of times. At one point he makes a really sleazy comment about how pretty his granddaughter's going to be when she finally grows up, and like how he's going to be really bummed out that he's probably not going to be alive by the time that she's basically like good to look at. And that just reminded me so much when Donald Trump said that he would totally be sleeping with Ivanka if he wasn't her father. And like, you can't say this crap about people you're related to. It's just not okay. Why are we still having these conversations? The husband is having this like the most bland affair with some like ex-client of his because he's a lawyer, and they go out for lunch once a month, and he like will peck her on the lips, and he's so unbelievably besotted with her but basically doesn't have the balls to do anything about it. And it's just so sleazy and lame and cliche and tortured, and I don't want to read about pervy old men and adulterous husbands. It's just not interesting anymore. I think this book back in the 80s probably would have been quite entertaining, but right now I just think that we've moved so far beyond all of these tropes that there are so many better thrillers out there compared to this. So that was it. Those are the books that Mum gave me. In Mum's defence, I gave her 0 time to prepare for that, and it literally was like, here's the criteria, pick it off the bookshelves, go. So she probably would have done better had I not done that, which is fair enough. I hope you enjoyed this. Next month, my partner and I are doing something funky, so hopefully it's going to be a good reading month as well. I think that video will already been posted, in which case I'll link it down below, but if it hasn't, because I'm not 100% certain what's going on at the end of January, beginning of February time, then watch out for that. Me and my partner doing something cool with our TBRs. Have a wonderful reading week. My dinner's now ready, so I'm going to get off this camera and go eat. Bye guys!